Welcome, Professor Sullivan. Dr. Paul Sullivan is a professor of economics at the National Defense University and an adjunct professor of security studies at Georgetown University. He has worked extensively in Africa and the Middle East in the field dealing with practical challenges related to energy and development. Professor Sullivan, the course that we will be running on economics and conflict looks at the issue of natural resource management. And we have several scholars who have linked natural resources with insecurity. How do natural resources contribute to insecurity? It's sometimes hard to grasp because at times the problems appear to be associated with an abundance of natural resources, as in the case of oil, but at other times insecurity and violence are associated with scarcity, such as water and land.
Well, people have their basic needs, and there's also the basic sense of greed among some people who are in power. If you have a lot of diamonds, for example, such as what occurred in Sierra Leone, and those diamonds were alluvial diamonds, and there's a lot of wealth in the ground. And essentially that wealth is used to buy weapons, which magnifies the already existing problems in the country. It's not like this stuff comes out of nowhere. There have to be animosities and angers and bitterness and competitions that have been going on for some time. It's not like you could just drop a few tons of diamond into a country and then have a civil war after that. Tribal differences or group differences can add to these problems. Religious differences, being a veil for actually resource conflict, can also contribute to this. Let's say land issues in Egypt, for example. Land is becoming more scarce, particularly good farmland. Often the issues that are described as Muslim Coptic tensions in Egypt are really land issues, farmland in particular. You have someone with a Coptic name owning land, and a Muslim decides that there's a disagreement on who owns that land, or maybe there's a Muslim and a Copt disagrees with that, and it ends up not being religious differences, it ends up being resource conflict. And then you have the issues of water rights and water scarcity, for example, in Darfur. That's not only a problem of resource scarcity in sort of an ironic way, because there is a pile of water under Darfur. There is a huge aquifer under Darfur, and all they would need to do is dig the wells and get the water out. But right now what we've seen is a history of change in the water cycle in Darfur. Those persons who had sheep and cattle or moved their sheep and cattle to other lands to graze, hence starting off some of the conflict. Less farmland, less grazing land, less water, less basic needs, hence something that magnifies the tensions that already existed between different groups.
Well, how can you use economic policy or economic management to solve those problems?
Well, one thing you can do is try to, first of all, get the right infrastructure in place. If the right water infrastructure were there, if the right energy infrastructure were in the Niger Delta, and I don't mean oil infrastructure, I mean setting up electric networks. I mean connecting that energy that actually belongs to the people of the Niger Delta and the rest of Nigeria and actually the rest of Africa, and using it for development. Having developmentally oriented leaders, that's the basic overriding umbrella thinking of this whole business. And that is, you have resources, you have wealth, and oil, and water, and natural gas, and diamonds, and gold, whatever you might have, and you use that to develop your people. That should be the main goal. Not to develop your bank accounts in Switzerland. Not to buy weapons to protect yourself in power for the next 60 years, like one of our new allies at an island off the west coast of Africa. There are just so many things that a great leader could do. And I think this goes right down to leadership, economic leadership. And without proper economic leadership, what you have are relatively small-minded people stealing the stuff for their own benefit rather than their people. As a leader, you're responsible to your population. One thing that's lacking in many of these countries is a complete sense of responsibility for their people. Not only for the time period that they're in power, but for the next generations. The oil in Angola is being taken out so quickly in order to make a profit to pay back the cost of having deep water wells drilled, that they'll probably peak within the next 10 years. Where will Angola be when that oil is peaking and starting to run out? What will they have? What have they used it for?
Does that mean that leaders must think strategically in terms of a longer-term development?
A great leader thinks strategically. A great leader thinks developmentally. A great leader listens to his or her people. And another thing that's lacking in the proper use of natural resources is listening. They don't want to listen. They have the power, they have the military, they have the intelligence services. You know exactly what I'm saying, and that protects them. So why listen to the people? Also, there's no tax collection because you have the wealth from the oil or natural gas or gold or diamonds. And without a buy-in from the people, there's no reason to listen to them.
So that really the tax structure, if you're supporting,
yes.
If you're supported by the bulk of the population, there's an inherent accountability.
There's an inherent accountability unless the tax collection is simply for the benefit of the leadership. Mm-hmm. The accountability should and could, in just about every country, be measured in the next voting cycle. Mm-hmm. But that's just the voting cycle. The accountability should be day to day. It should be, if there's a big mistake being made now, the people and their representatives should be able to say something about it.
So then there are not just economic, but there are political structures that support this development.
Everything's interlinked.
What about legal infrastructure? You mentioned roads and pipes and other things. What types of structures that have you seen that support sound management? Legal structures.
Legal structures? Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, having a rule of law, and that doesn't mean you have laws on the book. Every country has laws on the book. But you need to have a judicial system that's independent to some extent, and also judges that cannot be bought, and also judicial systems where answers can actually be found to cases before the great-great-great-great-great-great-granddaughter gets a continuance. And in many places it boils down to that. Land disputes, resource disputes, and all of that. And if people can't find a solution to their disputes in the legal system or in a discussion with their leadership, what do they turn to? Some of them turn to violence, and that can get out of control. I know of some examples of people that I know personally who have been in land disputes for decades, and it doesn't look like it will ever end.
So orderly dispute mechanisms.
Dispute resolution is vital. You need a trusted mediator. If you're in a traditional area of the country where modern Western or whatever legal systems are not understood very well, then at least getting some kind of a mediator who's trusted to work between the two parties and find a solution is a lot better than gunfire. And it often turns to gunfire, because some of these resources are quite valuable. For years in Sierra Leone and many West African states, diamonds weren't even considered valuable. The Western diamond merchants would come in and just pick them off the ground. When they were first discovered in South Africa, they were part of the mud of a house. And who would know? And then the value was discovered. But were people protected of the value in their land? No. There were land grabs, there were diamond grabs, people got upset. Also, these resources of great wealth can help support systems that in and of themselves are egregious, inhuman, immoral, apartheid for one. And systems like that can create chaos and violence for decades to come. Because these resentments don't end at the end of a fist fight or a gunfight. These resentments continue forever for many people. When you talk with someone from Serbia or from Bosnia, what do they begin the discussion with? The battle at the Field of the Blackbirds, and what was it, 1698? Or was it 1398? And then you speak with people in the Eastern Mediterranean. When does the dispute begin? When does it end? It's almost like some places it's beyond economics, it's beyond politics, it's beyond the resources. It's just simply an addiction to conflict. You can apply all the economic principles that you would like. You could apply all the legal principles and political principles that work many other places in the world. But if you can't get the people on board to the goal that they want to solve this conflict, you're not going to get anywhere. You can set up all the nice infrastructure and electric wires. You can set up a rule of law and bring the judges over here to be trained. But it has to be a psychological change. And that will take a long time for some places.
Well, thank you very much.